High on the steep mountaintop, a hooded figure traversed the treacherous slope. He looked up at the star that shined brighter than all the rest, and used it to guide his step through the desolate and craggy landscape. The hooded figure wore a dark cloak that seemed to absorb light, making his movements virtually undetectable. There was no breeze, so his cloak did not flap. His face was covered by a scarf beneath a black, tattered cowl. He trod carefully yet quickly through the barren wasteland and made his steady ascent with only a whisper of noise. The hooded figure's shadow crossed the mountain summit as he continued to follow the star, and after coming around the mountain face, he saw the distant barn. It was like a beacon situated directly below the star, calling out to him. The isolated structure was surrounded by farmland on the edge of a thick cedar forest. There were plenty of concealed approaches to the barn and just as many escape routes. The hooded figure permitted himself a brief, humorless smile. He crouched forward and started calculating his approach, with flickering pupils as he analysed the kill zone. He was the hunter, born amongst an ancient race of people from a forgotten corner of the world. He wore military standard body armour under his cloak. The hunter had a smooth and swarthy complexion, but up close his eyes were old beyond their years, a pair of disturbingly small pupils surrounded by vast pools of emptiness. He looked like a man who had been to hell and back, or worse, a man raised there. Without warning, a steel hand clasped the hunter's shoulder. He tried to break free, but the grip was iron tight, and it locked him into place. He jerked, heaved, and twisted, able to catch a glimpse of his uncle, Vicious. Didn't even hear me coming. His voice was hoarse with old age, but as hard and unyielding as the steel he had domed himself in. Ought to have taken off one of your ears. Might teach you how to hear better. I don't think having one less ear would improve my listening, countered the hunter, who found this uncle's mismatched eyes staring at him. This was a challenge to see who could get their weapon first. Vicious's great sword was sheathed over his shoulder, broad and heavy, but for those close quarters he reached for the dagger around his belt, while the hunter drew his 9mm from its holster and pressed the barrel to Vicious's pox-scarred cheek. "Shall we?" said the hunter. Vicious curved his lips into a slight grin, and the two embraced, a steel thump as they came together and slapped their arms across each other's backs. Vicious pulled back and stood with his chin held high. His beard was thick and unruly. It made him look beast-like, stretching down to touch the apex of his boulder-sized chest, while his neck was corded with muscles. He stood at 6'5", with arms as big as tree trunks. His hair was a deep, smoky grey, escaping from beneath his steel helm. He was the might and pride of their order. No other warrior rivaled him, but all emulated him. In the sworn brethren they both served, warriors were not permitted to hold on to such titles as names, only faces, and his face was the stuff of legend. "The first members of our order used to wear this," said Vicious, "and I think there was a very good reason that they stopped," the hunter replied, looking Vicious up and down. "But I guess steel compensates for old age." There was a twitch in Vicious's eye, but he played it off well with a warm chuckle. The hunter's stomach twisted into 1,000 knots. "Don't worry, uncle, you still look mighty fierce." "Aye," replied Vicious. He looked over the horizon with eyes that failed to miss anything despite their age. The hunter also scanned the ocean of trees enclosing the farmland. "Not too subtle. I think I can see 2 of them." By them, Vicious was referring to the other warriors who had come with the hunter. "Why are you here?" the hunter asked. Having Vicious here was like bringing a great white to kill a goldfish. "The withered old hags called me, too knowledgeable to risk being in the field, and asked me to hang up my steel for silk sheets and soft cushions." "You should. It's a great honour," said the hunter. Vicious gargled scornfully and spat, his phlegm splattering into the dirt. "Piss on that. I may be old, but I can still hunt better than the lot of you." It was true, but there would be no fun in admitting that. "Prove it." That brought a smile to Vicious's face. "Where are the others?" he asked. The The hunter pointed over to the slithering, narrow hilltops deep within the thick cedar forest. Like you said, over in the ridges, 5 of them. Not one of them on the road. I like it, said Vicious. Well then, I best be off, but I swear, if I can sneak up on any of the others, I'll nick off more than just an ear. The hunter nodded as the world hung on a knife's edge. Don't ever die, uncle, he said. Vicious smiled wryly, and the hunter could see he was amused. I'll see you again soon, Iscariot. The hunter watched Vicious disappear from sight. Once he was alone with his deepest thoughts, he dreamed of the day when a young pupil would look up to him the same way he had always looked up to his uncle. The hunter slithered through the darkness as he slowly advanced on the barn. He could hear the sound of voices and crossed the barn's threshold. They were only kids. An adolescent boy, standing by the sink, welcomed him with a smile. "Who are you?" he asked. After eliminating all potential blind spots, he turned his gaze into the surrogate father. "A hunter," he said, seeing no purpose to keep the surrogate alive. He strode towards the virgin girl with brutal efficiency. "Where is the child, Virgin?" the hunter demanded, leveling his gun to the girl's forehead. She touched her swollen stomach and whimpered, "Please don't hurt my son." The hunter stopped and looked at her, analysing. He was not experienced in childbirth, and there was a moment when he considered that the child could still be unborn. Then he noticed the recently bloodied towels in the corner. He nodded at her admirably, but sighed, knowing that it would not save her. "Clever," he said. "Well, I guess he can't be far away, can he?" The virgin girl's hands trembled, but she forced herself to hold the hunter's resolved gaze with an equally determined one. The mother, the virgin, the young girl said nothing, but her look was one that would stay with the hunter until the end of his days. A wisp of smoke exhaled from the gun's barrel. He lingered on the mother's sacrifice and started calculating where the child might have been taken. The hunter examined the situation in a matter of seconds. Firstly, the Messiah's protector was more cunning than any of those before him. The hunter checked the door the virgin girl had screamed at, finding an outside exit. Secondly, the hunter knew that if the protector was so quick to abandon the virgin girl and surrogate father, then he knew the truth. Thirdly, and most importantly, this John was shrewd enough to recognize the parents' worthlessness now that the mother had delivered. He may be difficult to hunt. The hunter didn't bother to search the surrounding area to procure John's identity. The hunter went out the furthest door on the left and into the trees. He found a single track of footprints leading into the forest. The hunter followed the trail and knew exactly where the protector would try to make his escape. The hunter followed the tracks up the mountain line, through the thick trees and into the ridges. He moved past shrubs of gorse, bracken, thistles and pine cones. That's when the hunter found them. He couldn't comprehend how this had happened. All 5 of them were under his command, and they were dead. Their bodies were piled up on top of one another. It had never gone like this before. How could one man carrying a baby kill 5 of the brethren's best? Then the hunter saw Vicious, sitting lazily on a rock, cleaning his great sword before sheathing it back into its scabbard. The hunter was drowning on dry land. "What have you done?" were the only words that could escape the hunter's lips. "I snuck up on them," said Vicious. The hunter's first thought was the only one that mattered. The Messiah. Vicious shrugged. "Alive and far from here. Found this John character months ago. Struck up a deal with him to ensure the child's escape." The hunter stepped back in disbelief, afraid of even being close to Vicious, as if treason could be contracted by mere proximity. "Why?" "There is something different about this Messiah," said Vicious, "and honestly, I'm just tired. You know, I used to remember the faces of everyone I killed. The years went by, and after a while, all the faces just kind of looked the same, especially the children. So I counted them instead. I mean, how hard could that be?" Vicious paused to let the weight of his words sink in. "I lost count." "You'd conscript all of humanity to fight heaven's war," said the hunter. Maybe, maybe not. I'd let the Messiah decide, said Vicious, stretching out his hand. It was drenched in dark, oily blood, the blood of fallen comrades. Beware the old man in a profession where most men die young. The hunter backed away. The sworn brethren? Vicious shrugged and retracted his peace offering. I killed them all before coming out here tonight. Then I am the only hope. The hunter tried to keep his distance, but Vicious would come at him with lightning speed. A split second was all the hunter could ask for. Whatever is in store for us has to be better than what we have now, said Vicious as he reached over his shoulder and grabbed the hilt of his sword, almost egging him on. You know, it was your brothers, my nephews, we wanted, but you offered yourself up in their place. Tell me, whatever happened to that small boy? He grew up wanting to be like you, said the hunter. Vicious had no response to that. They were at a crossroad and neither was going to let the other through. You owe this world a debt, uncle, so I'll kill the Messiah to pay for your mistake. With the pale moonlight at his back, Vicious got up from the rock and stood, his shadow dwarfing the hunter. No, not a split second. He's not that fast, not anymore. He'll stay at a distance till I've wasted my 4 remaining bullets, then impale me after my chamber is empty. Remember who you are, Iscariot, said Vicious. His visor, the hunter decided. 1 bullet to weaken its integrity and to ensure the second pierces his skull. The cry of steel purged the night of its eerie silence as Vicious ripped free his double-edged great sword. It glistened in the moonlight, while drops of blackish blood dripped from its handle onto the forest floor. As the leaves rustled in trepidation, the shadows of the 2 men closed in, and the valley of death eagerly awaited both of them. The hunter brought forth his gun, and the 2 of them exchanged ghoulish smiles. This is exactly what they were born to do. Whether the hunter was doing the right thing by killing the Messiah was of no consolation to him. He knew this was the moment he had spent his entire life training for. You have lived too long, uncle. On that much we can both agree. And then Vicious charged.